can hit continue. So I'd like to welcome everybody tonight to the Master Gardener's presentation on harvesting rainwater in Yavapai County by our lovely Jennifer Moreland. My name is Lauren Paz, and I will be moderating the Zoom presentation tonight. We ask that you please use the Zoom chat box directed to everyone for questions, and I will relay all questions at the end of the presentation to Jen. We will have approximately 15 minutes allotted for the questions at the end of the presentation. We will also be posting the link to the University of Arizona website, which has been posted to our chat box here, and it'll be available within a few days after tonight's presentation. Tonight's presentation is courtesy of the University of Arizona. We are Master Gardener volunteers for the Yavapai County Cooperative Extension, which is the outreach arm of the University of Arizona College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. Master Gardeners are trained by the University of Arizona and provide science-based horticultural information to the public by staffing horticultural helplines in both the Camp Verde and Prescott Extension offices, as well as by presenting talks such as this one that we're doing tonight. Yavapai County currently has over 200 active Master Gardener volunteers. For your future note, we are planning our next presentation on September 28th, it's a Tuesday at 6:30, and the topic will be Winter Vegetable Gardening by Kathy Watts. And also stay tuned for presentations on a variety of topics, including permaculture and eco-friendly gardening on October 28th, and vermicomposting, the wonderful world of worms, on November 16th. With that, I would like to introduce tonight's presenter. Jen Moreland has completed her Master Gardening Certificate in 2016 and was the past president of our Master Gardener Association in 2020. She is an advocate for composting, xeriscape gardens, and water conservation. I hear she is very handy with a pickaxe and is known for constructing rock bowls and freestanding rock walls in her yard. So with that, let's get started. Jen, the mic is yours.
Great. Thank you, Lauren, for that introduction. I appreciate it. And welcome to everybody. I'm glad that you're joining us here tonight. I hope that this is an inspirational presentation that might give you some good ideas on implementing some rain harvesting in your own sub-watershed. So let me get the screen share started. And my presentation tonight is going to last about 45 minutes. We will have 15 minutes of question and answer after that. So like Lauren said, please do use the chat box to post your questions to her. Well, to everybody, and she'll pick them up. So what this presentation contains for your information tonight is harvesting water that you can use in your garden, in your outdoor space. It's also it includes information targeting the support of our native plants, trees, and shrubberies. And this portion, it's all kind of interleaved, but this portion dealing with the native trees and all was put together by a great lady called, her name is Ann Audrey, and she was working with the Arizona Community Tree Council and funded by a grant from the Arizona Department of Forestry and Fire Management. So we've got several aspects of harvesting water to go through tonight. And I would also like to say a special thank you to John. He is a very good friend and neighbor who has spent over 20 years developing earthworks and rain harvesting in his own yard, his 0.8 acres that lies at the base of a mesa hill formation. and that Mesa Hill collects all this rainwater and drops it about 500 feet down into his yard at the base of it. So he's got a tremendous amount of water raging through his yard when the monsoon rains hit. So he's done a fantastic job, and we really appreciate him sharing his work with us and allowing us to photograph and present this to you tonight. So thank you, John. So when we talk about rain harvesting, let's define what it is that we mean from a residential water harvesting perspective, because there are certainly commercial water harvesting methods that are much bigger than what you as a homeowner or landowner might do. But you've got lots and lots of tools and methods to look at. So by rain harvesting, what we're talking about are simple earthworks that are designed to divert and catch surface water that is on your land surface, or complex systems that collect water from your rooftops and other hard surfaces and stores that in tanks and cisterns, and possibly using like motorized pumps to move it to a destination somewhere else in the yard. The rain harvesting does, the amount of rain harvesting that you actually implement does need to take into consideration how much rain you get in these big monsoon bursts that happen, as well as the precipitation that we see over the winter time. The topography of your property is going to play a very great role in the types of methods that you decide to implement, especially for those earthworks. And then the size of your roof catchment area, and we'll define that more as we go along. The size of your roof area is going to determine how much water you might catch into a cistern or a rain barrel. And then, of course, you're going to have a water budget. What plants do you have in your yard that you want to support with rainwater, and how are you going to get that water, and how much does it cost you to actually get that water? So we're going to talk about how to store water in soil, which is actually your largest area for storing water, and how to store water in tanks, and how to make all of that fit within your budget. So let's with this definition, and thank you to Jeff Schlau for his Master Gardener or Backyard Gardener column for defining rainwater harvesting for us. So we have 4 different types of water sources that we're going to go through tonight. We're going to talk about the rainwater that falls from the sky. We're going to talk about when that rainwater collects on hard surfaces like rooftops and driveways and roads and runs across your property. We're calling that stormwater. Gray water is another source of a continual source year-round of water that comes from the household uses that you flush out of your house, and we'll talk about what's gray water versus black water, and then AC condensate. So you have several water sources, and we're going to go through those sections individually. But just for a moment, consider what difference it can make to actually implement rain harvesting. So this is a picture of Roger Road down in Tucson, Arizona. And the housing development on the right, these are apartment buildings that were constructed in a traditional manner. All of the water from the roof is hitting gutters and hitting cement ditches that exit the water off the property as fast as possible into storm drains. The development on the right, I'm sorry, on the left, the Sonoran co-housing project, that developer actually designed his apartment complex to implement rainwater harvesting as part of the construction process. So this was actually put together from the very beginning to slow down that rainwater, store it into the soil, and to support more vegetation. And you can see how abundant the life is on the left-hand side of this image versus the right-hand side. So much more life happening with that rainwater harvesting. So the benefits to you as a homeowner or a landowner is that you get to use this rainwater for free. The state of Arizona and Yavapai County are both, there are regulations in place that allow you to use your water as it passes through your property. It will pass through and then continue on in the storm water channels that the public works and such have set up. But while it's on your property, you are allowed to use it. So you're going to slow the water down. Basically, if this water is raging super fast through your property with a bunch of momentum, it's moving sediment and rocks off of your property with it. It's picking it up and rushing it out. We definitely don't want that erosion. We want to slow that water down. We want to spread that water out. We want to capture all of that sediment and the small rocks and all of that and keep that water in your soil so that it can support more vegetation and encourage that vegetation to develop deeper roots so that it will last through the dry season. You know, the plants the native plants that are adapted to our area, they often have like tap roots and very deep root structures because the deeper soils stay moisture longer and they can actually survive for months on that subsurface oil. So, and if you get deeper, longer infiltration, you can actually start helping to recharge the local aquifers. And we know that we all need to play our part in not running us dry. So collecting rainwater to irrigate during the dry system, that's where we get to rain barrels and storage of rainwater for use during other months when it's not raining. So let's take a look then at the city. So the state and the county say, yes, go ahead and use your water. But if you live within a city limits, you might go talk to your city about whether they have a water conservation incentive program. I checked on this this week. City of Prescott, Arizona still has the rebates and incentives plan in place. So that is still active. The city of Sedona and city of Cottonwood, I have not yet been able to actually reach them on the phone. I've talked to them and left them messages, just have not gotten answers back. But if you look at their literature, they're very friendly towards water harvesting for the homeowners. You're not allowed, obviously, to plant vegetation in stormwater ditches, but if you want to do significant construction earthwork projects in your yard, you might actually talk to the cities about whether that requires a permit. So, so city to city might vary, but if you're in county property, you definitely have a green card for going forward with rain harvesting changes. Now, we talk about rainwater. We all know that there is this great monsoon season happening this year. It doesn't happen every year as great as it did this year, but we get a lot of rain in July and August, and it starts to dwindle off into September. That's probably our biggest downpours right there. And then over the winter months, we get a little bit of snow and precipitation, so you can add or top off any rainwater barrels that you've not filled up during monsoons. But take a look at what plants are actually in your yard and, the ornamentals, the edibles that require more water versus the native plants that are low water use. These plants are not designed, they haven't adapted that well, the edibles and ornamentals, to get through the dry season. April, May, and June can be very, very tough on all of our plants, including the native plants. I will note here that the low water use line, that bottom yellow line of low water use plants, that's an ADWAR list of plants that includes not just our native plants, but low water use from other similar regions around the world. So our line looks a little bit lower than this ADWAR line actually is. I also do want to point out that 19 inches is the average across the entire county. We, of course, have many, many microclimates. So at the bottom of this screen, there is a really good website resource where you can watch the rain gauges that are closest to your home. So there might be one, there might be three, but look at that website for the different rain gauges and you can find out how much water you've actually got, or you can put a rain gauge on your property. So we need to help our plants get through the entire year, get through the dry season. And how much rain do we actually collect on our property? Has a lot to do with how much we're going to be able to help our plants along. So this is an example calculation of a house, a simple house roof structure where you've got a 50-foot by 25-foot half of a roof. So it's a gabled roof, and this half that tilts towards us, 50 by 25, actually generates 14,804 gallons per year. That's a lot. That is a lot of water. The roof water that you're collecting, the rain sheds on the roof water is actually some of the cleanest water that you can collect into your rain barrels. So that's why you hear a lot of people focusing on roof catchment. Because there's really not a whole lot of sediment, and we're going to talk about how to get rid of that sediment and leaf debris before it hits your rain barrel. But for the entire roof, both halves, if you have rain barrel systems set up on both halves of your roof, you can actually collect about 29,000 gallons a year. Now, a 30,000 gallon tank, one single tank that's 30,000 gallons, is massive. I mean, that's the kind of thing that you're going to see on Yavapai Community College campus. So you're probably, unless you have land to bury a 30,000 gallon tank, you're probably going to be collecting these into multiple smaller tanks. So we'll look at that in more detail. And just know that that's like roof catchment. So like, if you multiply that out for what actually falls on your land, you take your acreage, and let's see, I've got that number here. That one acre is 43,560 square feet. 43,560 square feet. So that translates into about 69,000 gallons of rainwater a year that you can possibly store in earthworks or in rain barrels. So let's first start off by looking at earthworks, because storing water in the soil is your largest way to keep that water on your property. So it's free water, it's clean water, and you're going to store it where it's most beneficial for the vegetation that you want to promote and keep alive during the dry season. So this is an example of some simple earth basins that are built in the middle of sidewalks. You can see that depression there in the sandy area. That is actually below the sidewalk pavement area, and the basin is just a sunken area that the rainwater is going to fill up into. I'm sure that this basin somehow has an overflow or a spillway built in. We just don't see it in this particular angle. But this is the simplest basic unit of earthworks that everything else is kind of built upon. So when you sink a basin here, it's meant to be a temporary pond, meaning that the water is going to collect in there. It's going to slowly infiltrate into the earth, sink in deeper into the soil. But you don't want to pond this water in an area or in soil that's going to keep the water above ground more than like 12 hours. And that is part of mosquito control and bug control. So mosquito eggs will hatch in about 3 days. So you don't want any standing water for more than like at the longest a day. So you want this to be an infiltration mechanism when you build a basin into your yard to collect that soil and drop it in. So basins are built at the same level that the ground is at. There's no berms. There's nothing here keeping it from entering into that basin. It's just flow. It's the natural sheeting. The sheeting of the water is just sheeting and dropping straight into the basin. And so that's your like catchment area. Now, a basin with a berm, this is going to be where the sheeting action comes in and it actually hits the sheeting water comes in and hits that catchment area. But then you want to increase the volume of water that it's collecting. Let's say you hit rock or it's very hard to dig there by hand. If you want to build up the volume of water that can be collected in that basin, then you're going to start constructing rock dams or rock berms around the downhill side of that basin. So the water flow, you need to observe the water flow on your property. And if you see that it's moving in this particular direction, then you build your catchment area and your berm on the downhill side of the flow action. And you don't want to build this in, you want to build a permeable type of berm, and you want to have a plan for the overflow because those basins will fill up quite rapidly with water. And then the water is going to either overflow the berm or flow around the side, or if you've built in a spillway, you need to have a plan for where that overflow is headed after it is filled up this basin. So you can also build micro basins on the side of like your normal walking paths. So if you have a pathway up to your front door and you want to keep that pathway drier, but then you have all this nice vegetation on either side of the walkway to the front door, if you drop the soil level below the walking path area and you build up berms, little micro berms around the plants and the vegetation, you can drop some of that water in and try to sink it into the soil where your vegetation exists around that walking path. And it's not just the pathway to the front door. You can do this for all of your walking paths in your yard or through your gardens. So that's an implementation that's very popular. If you have like a steeper grade, like this is demonstrating a steeper grade down it looks like a driveway, you can actually build a series of micro basins or a series of basins and build up berms to create like a terracing effect. So the basin is going to be a little bit deeper so that it catches some water for that infiltration. And then the berms are going to hold it there to increase the duration that water is infiltrating. But then you are going to have spillways. I'm looking for it in this picture. Spillways where it's going to move down the hill from the top basin to the next basin to the next basin. And the spillways, you don't want to line those up in a channel because that will just create a shooting action straight down the hill. You want the spillways to alternate. So if the first one's on the right, the next one's going to be on the left, and the third one's going to be on the right again, and the fourth one's going to be on the left. I have an alarm going off behind me. Let me turn that off. I'm sorry. Sorry about that. Okay, that would have gone on for the rest of the presentation if I didn't go move that. So, okay, so yeah, so the patterns of microbasins walking down the hill can be linear, they can be staggered, they can be fish scaled. That bottom right diagram demonstrates a fish scale and how the fish scale sort of overflows into the next layer of berms. So these are some basic building blocks of earthworks. If you take that berm concept and you stretch it out along a greater contour line of the land. So if you have a downhill section, it can be very gradual or steeper. But if you build a berming type of action across the contour of the land, then as that water sheets down the hill, you can collect it behind that berm. And this is actually a really great place to build in infiltration trenches. So, so on the uphill side of the berm, if you actually dig a hole deeper, be it 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, and fill that hole in with rock and gravel, then when the water comes down and hits that swale, hits the berm at that swale, it's actually going to sink down into the gravel, and that'll create some catchment volume before the whole swale fills up with water and overflows the spillway. So, just one of the things to sort of, one of the basic things here about water is that water does follow the gravel. It follows the rocks. So it gets slowed down by sand and clay, but it will follow rocks. So if you create rock areas, that's going to kind of influence the movement of the water and where it goes. And you can fill those infiltration dishes with mulch as well, or dead trees or something that will actually end up decomposing and creating some rich soil for planting. So infiltration ditches are a good idea for vegetation areas. Now, how do you build a basin in a berm? This is the general recommendation that you see out there on a lot of the websites. The flow of the water hits the basin. The berm is going to be the height of the berm, how tall you stack the rocks, are going to be 4 times, I'm sorry, the width is going to be 4 times the height. So the berm width is going to be quite wide, and that's going to keep it from washing away when that tremendous amount of water hits it. So you're going to use larger rocks that don't get moved as easily by the water, and you're going to build it wider to create a resistance from that force of water. Is a very, very strong force, and it's going to move smaller rocks. So you need to build up that resistance. one of the things that I personally like to do is I like to put the smaller rocks in the center part of the berm, followed by mediums, followed by larger. So there's like a larger size of rock, and that when the water hits the small rocks, it'll start slowing it down. It hits the medium rocks, it'll create some turbulence, which decreases its energy, and then it hits the larger rocks, and that will start to stop the water, and then the water builds up and flows over or flows through the spillway, but you haven't moved the berm at the point of impact. So the berm itself is going to be at its weakest point the moment you finish construction, because you've stacked rocks and bricks and all of that up. It really needs for that water and sediment to get in there to kind of cement it all together. So one of the things that John and I talked about is when this water flows down the hill, it's bringing a whole bunch of rock and sediment with it. So the bottom of your basin is actually going to collect extra material after every rain. And it's a good idea to clean out your basin so that it doesn't fill up and go away. But if you pick up that sediment and that silt, you can shovel it to the top of the berm and actually start covering the berm with the sediment and silt. And that will help cement the rocks down, but also build an area for vegetation. So you can actually plant on top of the berm once you start getting soil up there on top of it. Your basin is also a planting area. So you don't want to, in the construction of this berm, you don't want to compact that too much by stomping around inside the middle of the basin. Build it from the outside of the berm, and definitely stomp on top of the berm because you want the berm to be very strong. So let's look at some of John's work in his yard where he implemented earthworks. As I said, his acreage sits at the bottom of Mesa Formation, and he's got this arroyo of 500-foot drop of water that hits his neighbors uphill are like a horse farm with very flat areas for their horses to run around. So they don't do much to slow that water down. And then it hits the road area, and there's a culvert underneath the road where this water just comes raging through. So it's gushing through with quite a bit of momentum when it enters the property. So John has built this swale that leads to this small basin, and this basin is about 6 feet in diameter. And you can see how John has sort of planted some irises and yuccas along the top of the berm to stabilize it. So the roots of those plants are helping to stabilize it. The right side of the swale is native plants. And so those root systems are helping to stabilize that swale. So it doesn't get eroded away as much. And then that basin fills up with water. He's scooping out, after the water has settled in, he's scooping up all that sediment and putting it on top of the berm. You can see kind of to the right side of that basin, the berm is dirt where he just scooped up this year's monsoon silt and sediment on top of it. So he's got that swale, and that's like a curved formation to slow the water down. So you don't want water running in straight lines because that adds momentum and adds force for moving sediment and rock. So when John built this in a curved, sort of an S curve, that slows the water down so that when it does hit that basin, it has lost some of that momentum. So the berm, the basin overflows a spillway into an exiting berm. But what I wanted to demonstrate here is the effect that this has had. Unfortunately, we don't have like before and after pictures. So these earthworks are 15 years old, and look at how green it is around the swale and the basin. And this was like an eroded area before earthworks were put in. So this is new sediment and new growth that has happened over the past 15 years. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that's like the very sort of outside corner of the property where a lot of that new sediment came to lie. And he's got some native bushes that have taken to that area and grown up. So service berries and desert scrub oaks and all kinds of good stuff that have grown into that silty sort of area. So so that's one. John's has all kinds of earthworks on his property, but this was I thought a really good example to show you here tonight. So earthworks are a great way to sort of sink the water into your soil, slow it down and sink it. The other strategy that we're going to talk about is the rainwater barrels. So you see all kinds of tanks implemented around town. You can, around the different towns, a lot more businesses are getting smart about collecting water off of their roofs. But there are all kinds of different barrels. But the system that you set up for the cisterns, the system itself is kind of a known implementation. So the different components that go into putting this together are readily available online or through the contractors. So you have the roof is your catchment surface. And we talked about calculating how big your roof was and how much water it can collect. But it exits the roof either through a scupper or down into the gutter directly. The gutter, you're going to want to keep that clean. Certainly if you don't have a screen on top of the gutter, then when the gutter comes to their downspouts, you want a screen covering the holes of the downspouts, and that's to keep out any pine needles or leaf debris, some of the larger sort of debris. And then the first flush diverters are an optional sort of component to the system. And what they do is they have a flap in them that stays open to shoot the first water that runs off the roof is full of this sediment and debris. And so it's going to shoot down a dirty water downpipe and flush that debris out. And you're going to want to flush it, like into an open basin, like what we were just looking at. Or you don't have to have this at all. You can just screen that out when it's going directly into the cistern. So the diverter, then it will, the flap, it has a ball that raises up as the water fills the tube. It raises the ball up and that flips the flap the other way so that the water then is directed, cleaner water is directed to the downspout that goes into the cistern. So screens at this point, at the entry point, are super important. So you definitely want to look into mesh screens or some of the poly screens. You want to keep your water in the tank as clean as possible. And all tanks have an overflow, and you need to plan where that overflow pipe is going to take the water, because like I said, you're dumping 19,000 gallons of water. You dump that into a 100-gallon barrel tank, you're gonna overflow. So you need to have a plan for the overflow. So as I was saying, there are all kinds of tanks. This is an example of a metal tank with a plastic liner, and the downspout runs to an underground and then bubbles up through the top of the tank to fill up. They did not capture where the overflow pipe for this tank is coming out. Here are the different types of tanks. So you can get the steel reinforced concrete, also known as ferrocement, the polyethylene, the metal lined, and then the bottom left is Desert Botanical Garden. They've actually covered the outside of their tank in ledge stone to make it look all pretty. So you could actually walk past that and not realize that that's probably a concrete tank on the inside of that thing. So all kinds of tanks available, all kinds of sizes. It really depends on your budget. In John's case, he was able to find most of his components fairly cheaply through like garage sales and secondhand and repurposed items. So he's done a great job at reuse and repurposing to build and develop his system. But he's got a first flush device. You can kind of see the square box hanging up there on the wall. He's got a first flush diverter there, and the dirty water runs through the downspout to an open basin further down in the yard. And then his clean water pipe comes across the top of his fence here and goes into this polyethylene barrel. And this polyethylene barrel overflows into 2 more tanks by gravity. So basically these tanks are staggered downhill. And when one fills, it fills the next one. When that one fills, it fills the next one. So it's very expandable. He can continue to add more and more tanks as he finds them and as he finds uses for them. So far, this monsoon season, he has maxed out his rain barrel capacity at 750 gallons from roof water. That's in these 3 tanks. He's actually collected a lot more water than that in other tanks around the property, but these 3 tanks, he's already collected 750 gallons of water, which, is a pretty amazing collection. So his 3rd tank then in the back, as you can see in this bottom left-hand picture, he's run hoses over to a diversion swell, and so it will overflow into the diversion swell that goes down into that basin that we saw earlier. So his system is complete there. And then what he does with that water, so he'll store this water until dry season. And then come dry season, he has built a motor with a pump and a timer, and he can pump this water from these tanks through irrigation lines back up to his gardens. So he can manually turn that on and set up the timer. And all of that is powered through the solar panels, 100% solar powered through his house PV system. So, and all of that motor and pressure tank and timer and all that is salvaged, repurposed, and repaired materials that he was able to find and locate. So that's kind of what John has set up. He did want me to note for you guys that in gravity-fed systems like what he has set up, be very familiar with the type of valves that are available for switching between the different pipes, because there are bulb valves and gate valves that open up completely with gravity, and with gravity-fed systems, and that's what you want. But like the diaphragm valves, they require pressure, and gravity-fed systems don't have the pressure to open diaphragm valves. So he just wanted to make sure that that I told you guys about, that to pay attention to the valves that you install. Now with rainwater barrels, they do come with maintenance items. So you do have to take care of all of these different components that are there because they do get dirty. So this is a quick checklist of some of the more important maintenance. You do have to empty these tanks, and usually they're pretty well emptied by the end of dry season, but annually you need to hose out the inside of the tanks to get rid of the algae that has grown. And you do need to check all of those pipe fittings to make sure that they haven't burnt up in the Arizona sun and have any cracks or leakage from them. And then seasonally, which means really like twice a year, you know, the end of winter and then the end of, I think he said monsoon season, or maybe it's the end of summer. But you do need to inspect and clean the gutters and scuppers up on top of the roof, of course. But if you have any sump pumps or basins that are not securely enclosed like these rain barrels, but they just have like lids sitting on them, you do need to get in there and clean out the sediment, and you're going to find scorpions and spiders and all kinds of things that were attracted to that water. So you'll have insects in there to clean out. And then of course your filters, you're really going to need to check your filters at all stages of the system, from the gutters to the rain barrels to the pumps. Check all of the screens after every hard rain, because there's a lot of debris that's going to be moving around with this amount of water. So you need to clean those screens off and just make sure that they're still holding, they're still screening like they're supposed to. And of course, as with any electrical system, you need to make sure that they don't burn up or fail, or that pack rats got in and ate the wiring, that sort of thing. So just watch for failure of any electrical components. So the roof catchment rain barrel system does come with some maintenance. Okay, so let's go then into some stormwater aspects. And again, it's free and abundant, and usually it's a little overly abundant. It comes, you know, in great volumes. This is running off of hardscape surfaces and hitting some part of your land, usually eroding it away. And if it's, you know, collecting on a patio and just sitting on top of your patio, you know, that's a problem. You obviously need to take care of the water before it gets to the patio area, divert it somewhere else. In the case of streets, what has become very popular, and especially with city like public works, is curb cutting. So maybe you have a curb on a road and there's rushing water going down it. You can actually siphon off some water siphon off some of that water into the right-of-ways through curb cuts. Go to your city and ask permission to get curb cuts. And so that's what Brad Lancaster did down in Tucson. And you can see the difference that he was able to make by getting his city to allow him to cut the curbs and divert that water into the right of way. And I think these are all edible trees in the right of way for him too. So this is the city of Prescott, and it looks like they've kind of gotten on board with curb cutting. You can see the right of way in the top picture there. They've implemented a little channel with some vegetation planted around it. And then on the bottom left-hand side, you can see they've lowered the area off the side of the sidewalk so that it creates a basin for these plants to grow in. I think there are curb cuts in there. I haven't seen it myself, so I think that's what I was told. But City of Prescott is on top of this. And then what John did was he's got that high road that is sheeting a whole bunch of water into his yard at several points, not just that culvert that we looked at in the beginning, but at the top northeast lot corner, that road runoff is hitting his backyard. And so underneath this gravel looks like a level walking path, but underneath this gravel, there's actually a swale that has been dug out using larger construction equipment, and it moves that water, it diverts that water around his house and gets it around the structures, and then he utilizes that on the back side of the house. He has earthworks and such that take advantage of that. But this is an example of a large swale that's moving large amounts of water, and he's created the S-turns in this swale by planting very large berms. So the upper right-hand side of the screen, this is a berm that has some large mature growth on it, but that berm is actually influencing that swale water to keep it turning and keep it slowing down and that sort of thing. And he does actually have a little bay area that collects some of that water for his rose garden behind the garden shed. It's a very pretty area. So gray water, we're not going to spend much time on this, but you do have the rights to use gray water unless you're in the city of Prescott. So I think nobody else in Yavapai County restricts you, but you should, if you're in city limits, you should probably check with your city just to make sure. But ADEC does say that you're allowed to use gray water, which is from the bathroom sink, the shower, the bathtub, and the clothes washer. So ADEC does not want you to use the kitchen sink, the dishwater, or the toilet. They consider that black water, and they handle that through their sewer systems and septic tanks. So, so the gray water that you are allowed to use, you are allowed to use it only if your house is not in a flood zone, and you're allowed to use it on your property. So don't overspray it into your neighbor's property, and don't dump it into the storm drain. You can't use it on your vegetable garden. You can flood your nut trees and citrus trees on the ground. And then you have to have a built-in in case of failure. So if your distribution of gray water fails, you need to be able to switch that over to the regular piping, the normal regular house piping. And then any gray water storage must be covered for mosquito control. So ADEC says that you must cover that. How much water can you generate from your home? You know, it depends a lot on the size of your household and how often you're running your washers. And you can choose to collect from one of these sources, one of these appliances, or all of them. But pretty much all of these areas, you are using soaps and detergents. So just be aware that if you decide to collect from your clothes washer, then the detergents and soaps that you put in your clothes washer need to be biodegradable soaps that are septic safe. So so it does limit the type of soaps that you want to buy. So you're going to find the piping of all of these systems where it exits the house. Find the exit point, and you're going to tap into that. If you're building a new house and you're planning a gray water system, then you're going to have a dual split, probably with a valve to go back and forth between the septic tank versus the irrigation collection. And then you're going to be careful about where you put the disbursement of the gray water. So, so you can irrigate ornamentals and ground covers and some bedding. Citrus and nut trees are allowed by ADEC, but it does contain salt. So just be aware that that you're not killing any plants because of the salt in there. And you definitely don't want to spray it on any food or any salt sensitive kind of plants. So probably you don't want to do any kind of spray. Actually, you want to just do like ground application, soil-based irrigation with rainwater. Excuse me. So this is an example of how John has harvested his clothes washer water. He's tapped into the drain pipe that came out through the outdoor patio area. He stubbed that and he runs it into, he runs it through several layers of filtering, and he pumps it into a rain barrel that he can attach to his, or he has attached to his normal garden hose. So he can disperse this water. It's a very flexible disbursement. He can drag that hose anywhere in the yard and run the gray water to plants that need it, or he can run the gray water into actual rain barrels and fill it up to the top and cap it off and set it aside to use for later. So, so the big thing with gray water is that it does contain that soap scum. So you need to have multiple layers of filters, and then know that some of it is still going to make it into your rain barrels if you're storing it, and you're going to have to clean that out of the rain barrels. So just be aware of that with gray water. Here's some good photographs showing how his hose is pulled out into the yard, and an example of a full rain barrel he has already filled up and set aside for next dry season. And then the bottom picture, you can see that he's got some beautiful garden spaces and container spaces that he can water from the hose. Now, he does say that that soap scum that's in gray water will very quickly gum up the small irrigation emitters. So, you know, don't put it on those little cannons and screw top emitters. You need to disperse it in something that has a very large hole so that it doesn't get gummed up. So we're going to talk about then, you know, what you do once you actually have all this wonderful earthworks in place, and you want to put vegetation in that matches your water budget. How much water have you been able to store in earthworks and in rain barrels, and how many plants and what type of plants does it support? So you've got lists. There are a few different lists actually that are available for low water use, drought tolerant plants, and I believe that you can pick this one up in Prescott, and I don't think I've seen this particular one in Sedona, but there's a website at the bottom down here, azwater.gov. But this is an actual physical book. Online, there's a database of native and naturalized plants that one of our master gardener groups have put together. So you see the web address at the top here. You can get to this database online and look up different trees and shrubberies and flowers that you can plant for low water use. Really great resource here. I use this one all the time. So what John and his wife Maureen have done is they've been converting their yard to xeriscaping and low water use rain gardens that they can support with however much water they've collected in their rain barrels. And so on the left-hand side here, you see one of the beds. He's actually got a basin that he's planted an agave in. This is a desert willow, a cholla in the background. So he's planted some low water use plants here. And then on the right-hand side, you can see that they are replacing half of their lawn turf with another bed, and that's going to be a cactus garden. So cacti and agave and yuccas. So that's their current work that they're out there on every day right now. The bottom picture is an example of one rock dams, or what they call it, but it's like a swale. It's 3 swale lines, 1 rock depth each, so it's just rocks lined up. I think they've repurposed some unused paver stones in there, but these are designed to slow that water down, that grade, and they're just now starting to plant grasses and some native plants in there. And that's actually not John's yard, that's another neighbor's yard, but it fit on this slide, so I threw it in there. So when you do start talking about what plants to put where, know that ornamentals and edibles are your most water thirsty plants, your wettest plants, and so they are not as prone to igniting in fire. So those wet plants are really good to include right around the house and in the zone 1 of the Firewise area. Those tend to be smaller plants anyway. Zone 2 is a great place to start your earthworks and sinking your water into the soil to support native trees and native plants. Use the Firewise guide. You can get those at the fire department and online, but use the Firewise guide to look at how to prune your trees and bushes up and away from each other for zone 2. And then zone 3, you're just reducing the fuel load for any fire there. But this is a great place for some larger earthworks as well, maybe a bigger basin, a bigger swale, places to support a lot of good, maybe wildlife type of food plants. So if you're just getting started or you're looking to move your water harvesting to the next level, probably the best thing that you can do for yourself is have a piece of paper that you're sketching out your plan on. And I highly recommend sketching it in pencil because it will change. But show where your house and your driveway and any outbuildings are. Know where your water is coming into your lot, know where it's exiting your lot. Maybe draw in the patterns of where the rainwater has, caused erosion channels, or where it sheets across an area and you just can't keep anything on it. And then just, find the areas where you want to build out the vegetation, and how are you going to get water from where it is right now to where you want it. And so start making some of those plans. Where can you put rain barrels on your property that your neighbors don't get mad that they have to look at the rain barrels? So sketch something out on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be, AutoCAD or anything super fancy. It's just you sketching, but start simple and work your way up. So this is an example of what like a first time sketch might look like. You've got a basic house, you can get water off of wherever the gutter downspouts are. Where do you move it into basins? Where do you move it into rain barrels? If you're going to go the route of gray water, then go find those pipes and figure out how you can tap into them. And then once you have your idea of where the water can be moved, then how are you going to build out the basins? Are you going to plant inside the basins, or are you going to plant on the outside of the basins? And there are some great resources online for planning these sort of landscaping ideas. And rainwaterharvesting.com is one really, really good source. That's the Lancasters down in Tucson. But the idea is that the bottom of the basin is going to be very wet. The top of the basin is going to be very dry. The middle sloping sides of the basins need to be stabilized. So, you know, pick your plants well for where within the basins you're going to be planting them. And start simple and cheap. That's my recommendation. So when you start moving water, water is a very powerful force. When you start moving water, it's going to change your landscape. So move a little bit at a time, see what it does, adjust it, you know, get it right over a number of years. This is a process. So I read a great story about a couple who walked around their yard every morning for their morning walks, and they just kind of kicked rocks around with their feet as they moved along to create the one rock dams and the berms and such. If you have any downed trees on your property, you know, instead of having those removed from the property, you can align them to create a berming effect, a temporary berming effect as it decomposes, as long as it doesn't create a fire hazard for your house. And then, you know, if you're inclined to dig, you can grab a pickaxe. It's great exercise. Move some rocks around and create swales and basins, and just, you know, create micro basins on the side of your walkways. You probably, if you've got a walkway, you've probably already got plants, so you want to just create some micro basins to feed the existing vegetation. And then mulching. Mulching is very important for the cooling effect and keeping the soil from drying up and evaporating. If you want to go to the next level of installing gutters and directing downspouts, then direct them into a rain barrel or a water basin. And then, you know, go to garage sales and thrift stores and look for items that you might repurpose and reuse in your efforts to implement rain harvesting. And if you have any questions or anything else that the Master Gardeners can help you with, feel free to call us or email us. We have 2 help desks, and here's the email addresses and the phone numbers. You can jot those down, or maybe Mary or Lauren can put those in the chat box for you guys. But feel free to reach out to a Master Gardener to help. So thank you very much. The Tree Council thanks you. I thank you. And the University of Arizona thanks you. So hopefully.
So Jen, we have a lot of questions for you. And I've done this presentation, but not to the extent that I had John's information. This is fascinating.
Yeah.
So let me just go through a few quick ones. And there was a lot of talk on gray water. One of the things Tricia noted that she had to turn her gray water off in the winter from her washer machine because it froze. And
yeah.
So,
and actually, if I can say, Lauren, that's actually a concern for any above ground piping. So you can run piping underground, and if you know, put it deep enough that it won't freeze. But any piping that comes up and into tanks or disbursement, you know, irrigation, all of those you have to protect from freezing. So valves are important. Valves to be able to drain pipes and winterize them.
Okay, and then we had a question from Maher, I believe his name is. Any issues with bacteria growth when you store rainwater in plastic barrels when stored for a long period?
So you're definitely going to get algae, the green algae stuff, and that's not an issue. You're just going to need to clean your rain barrels once a year. So you're going to clean them when they're dry, you know, either empty them or at the end of dry season once you've used all the water. But the algae is not a problem as far as a concern to your plants when you disperse it into your gardens. But you know, your biggest thing is to keep insects out and to screen out any of the debris and insects so that it does go in as clean as possible. But rainwater does have, you know, contaminants in it. Everybody thinks that it's really clean, and it is cleaner, but it still has certain levels of E. coli, certain levels of fertilizer pollutants and those sort of things. So, so just know that I wouldn't drink from your rainwater barrel.
Pablo asked, I have heard some persons put Clorox in rain barrels to keep water clean and not smelly. Thoughts on that?
Yeah, I know that some people do use diluted bleach water to clean their rain barrels out and to even clean sump pumps out. My personal concern with bleach is twofold. You've got the chlorine in there, which will evaporate out if you let it dry out, but bleach also contains dioxins. So just be aware that that you're putting dioxins out into your yard if you're using bleach.
Now we have a waterfall in our yard, and I put some algicide in occasionally. Is that an issue?
I don't know, Lauren.
I don't know what it's in it. So
I mean, I would be careful putting any kind of herbicide and fungicide and algicide in your rainwater barrels. I would just be
careful, be cautious.
Yeah.
Can I ask about snow collection, because that's part of the formula of how many inches of precipitation we get per year? So do you know how much actually rainwater quote we get from a snow level? I know it's not a 1-for-1.
No, 1 inch of snow is not 1 inch of rain. It's
right.
Much less than that. And to answer your question, I do not off the top of my head know the exact ratio, but I do know that I have seen people create basins where, like, when they shovel their sidewalks, they move the snow into the basin, so it's a great big snowball that melts.
We do that too. We have one master gardener in Prescott Valley that actually has 2 big collectors at the front end of their yard inside their gate, and they shovel and they put all the snowpack in there and let it melt and keep putting it in there, and they are able to use that water until about April.
Yeah, that's nice.
So question on coring out the curbs to collect rainwater or stormwater that's coming down. Do you have any knowledge of how cities or public works are acceptant of that concept?
I know that well, the city of Prescott is doing it. I showed the one example where they're doing it for themselves. So their version of public works, I don't know if they call it public works.
Whatever, yeah.
So they're actually doing that. So I should think that they're friendly to talking to a homeowner who wants to approach them about cutting a curb at their property. The city of Sedona is friendly to it. If you go talk to them, I didn't find like a permits form online when I went looking, but go talk to Public Works, because they've got a fantastic water conservation plan in place, and I'm sure that they would be willing to work with you.
And I'm sure that HOAs have an issue that you have to go through your HOA too if you're in a community with controls.
Always.
Question for you: what have you deployed in your yards? What kind of systems?
So
I know you have a pickaxe.
I do. I tell you, I'm a big earthworks kind of girl. I don't. I've really never done rain barrels or gray water, but man, I love building freestanding rock walls and rock dams, and slowing water down in order to be able to plant a new tree, and I will dig holes and I will move rocks, and all of that's free. I'm my own free labor, and me and my pickaxe, and we dig plenty of rocks out of our yard. So
and then if you're in a home or yard that has been established, which obviously has trees and root systems, how difficult is it to deploy an earthworks around those root systems? Is it even feasible?
Yeah, it is, and that's a really great question. So you obviously don't want to rip up massive parts of existing root systems. You can actually start earthworks on the ground level that exists and just, build a rock berm around an existing tree outside of the canopy area, outside of the drip line. You can dig micro basins in small areas where you're not tearing up too much of their root, but don't go too deep.
Okay.
Don't disturb, and definitely don't do that during dry season.
And then finally, are you and John available for consulting? There's a lot to know here.
It is a lot of information, and the best way to reach me really is through the help desk, the Master Gardener's help desk. But I tell you, there are some fantastic resources online, and the way that I got started with my knowledge is Brad Lancaster's 3 volumes of books.
And I've gone through some of his stuff too, so.
And they're so easy to follow, and the instructions in the books are great. And his website is great. Good place to get started. But let me also say that Australia has been doing this for decades. If you go to buy any new products online, 70% of it's coming from the other side of the world. Australians are all over this rainwater harvesting, and so their websites are fantastic too.
And by the way, Mary Barnes noted that 10 inches of snow equals 1 inch of rain.
Awesome.
Yes, we don't get a lot of rain during the winter here.
No, it's really the monsoons that fill us up just really, really fast.
So you have a lot of thank you for an informative presentation. We're going to be printing out the chat box, so I'll send it to you. But Jen, thank you so much. I am just enthusiastic about digging holes in my yard. So
great. Hopefully we've inspired many people to go dig holes.
Thank you so much for putting this together. I know just from what you put in with John's work, it was truly an amazing effort on your part to present to this.
Great. Well,
thank you. If there's no more questions, we are going to sign off. And Jen, if you'd stay online, we'll do a quick debrief afterwards. But thank you, everybody. And I hope to see you in September for the next presentation on winter vegetable gardening. Thank you and good night.
Thank you. Good night.